Hello everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel, and in today's video I thought of delving deep into the political science syllabus for CSS, as it is very concerning for students to identify what kind of contents they need to cover first of all while preparing for political science. And this is the right time for students to gear up their preparation as CSS 2026 is around the corner. So today we will talk about political philosophy. Political philosophy is the oldest branch of political science, and it is a topic which is very important, and it is something that all CSS aspirants must know. And I'm sure that all students are always overwhelmed about political philosophy when they hear names like Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Machiavelli, Rousseau, Montesquieu. They're completely clueless about them. They think that the ideas given by them are no longer relevant, they are outdated, and they are unable to create a link between the contemporary developments in political realm and the political philosophy given by these philosophers. So for CSS aspirants, it's very important to have a very strong foundation when it comes to theoretical reasoning and philosophical analysis, and this is something that is provided by political philosophy. So before we delve deep into political philosophy, it is very important to know that what political philosophy actually talks about. So as I mentioned earlier, that political philosophy is the oldest branch of political science, and it talks about very fundamental ideas of political science, which include sovereignty, justice, equality, reasoning, and political morality. So these points are actually just major chunks and major ideas that encompass the crux of political philosophy. Political philosophy is definitely more than these ideas that I've discussed. It talks basically about the evolution of governance, administration, how from the time of small populations, small societies, the governance was administered, to modern day contemporary political affiliations, in terms of how constitution is evolved, in terms of the importance of constitution, in terms of importance of rights and duties, and a war, taxation, all these ideas. We think that the concept of taxation, duties of citizens, and rights of duties and rights of citizens, and mercenaries and constitution, all these ideas are new. But if you understand political philosophy, if you read it, you get to know that all these ideas are in one way or another deep rooted in the political philosophies of different philosophers that we'll be studying in CSS in the portion of political philosophy, and they touch upon these ideas. They try to create a link between morality, individualism, social coherence, and all these fundamental and wonderful ideas that we today talk about and today that we discuss about in contemporary political research. So yes, this is what, or this is how we can define political philosophy. So coming to the main point of the video, FPSC syllabus regarding political science, the link description that I shared in my last video, you can please visit it. So yes, according to the syllabus of FPSC with respect to political science, there are a few number of political philosophers that we are supposed to read and understand and analyze. Otherwise, if we look at political philosophy different from CSS, it is very wide subject, and there are a number of political philosophers that one needs to study and read. But with respect to political science, we see that the political philosophers are divided into two sections. The first one being Muslim philosophers, and the second one being Western philosophers. So basically in CSS, we are supposed to study Western political thought and Muslim political thought. And both of these schools of thoughts in philosophy are very important. And if you want, you can take a screenshot of this list, as it is very important. It helps to keep a check on the different philosophers that one needs to cover. So first we'll talk about the Western philosophers. I've shared this book, Western Political Thought by Aslam Chaudhry. This is a book that is very helpful, and you can also consult other books, but this one book is something that really helped me in my preparation. And these are different philosophers which are included: Plato, Aristotle, Machiavelli, Hobbes, Rousseau, Marx, and there are many more philosophers as well, which of course when we'll be delving deep into the understanding of different philosophers which we'll be discussing, then we'll get to know different philosophers and their ideas. And then we move forward. There are also different Muslim political philosophers, which include Al-Farabi, Al-Mawardi, Al-Ghazali, Allama Iqbal, Nizamul Mulk, and Ibn Khaldun. So you can take a screenshot of this as well, as the crux of what they talked about is written here. And of course, for Muslim political thought also, I shared this book. This book is very useful, and I definitely recommend that for Muslim political thought, one must read different research papers, especially different universities in Turkey have published research papers on Al-Farabi and Mawardi, and they've translated them in English, so that is very helpful. They cover a more holistic point of view. In comparison to Western political philosophers, the content of Muslim political philosophers is not a lot, so I always recommend reading more about them through YouTube or research papers. And yes, so this is basically the major division that we have in our CSS syllabus for Western political philosophers and Muslim political philosophers. Okay, so the next very important point which needs to be discussed is the role of political philosophy in CSS. So when we read about political philosophy in CSS, it is mostly with respect to political science. So in that respect, we always try to understand, or we always approach this subject with the perspective that it is the oldest branch of political science. It is a branch of political science that delves into the fundamentals of what governance is, what state is. It talks about the basic ideas of freedom, equality. It talks about how individual rights, the concept of individual rights has evolved. It talks about what makes a government just, who should have power and why they should have that power, and what is the best way to organize society. It basically, it's not about current affairs or data, but it's more about deep thinking, reasoning, and moral debates about politics. It is about constitutionalism. It is about justice. It is about sovereignty, state, and all these great, wonderful concepts which play a very important role in our contemporary political debates. Then, of course, political philosophy in CSS is so important that it helps us focus on different social contract theories. There is the social contract theory of Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau, and these are not just simply some kind of random contract theories, but these are actually ideologies. We discussed the political ideologies where we talked about liberalism. We talked about authoritarianism. So when you read these kind of social contracts, and you get to know, you can actually create a link between the political theories and the political philosophies. You understand that how Hobbes focused on security, yet it had a tinge of authoritarianism in it. At the same time, Locke talked about rights. At the same time, he was advocating for liberalism. And at the same time, we see Rousseau was talking about freedom, but somehow it was freedom and it was more about people's will. And it was more about general will of people with collective growth, which somehow, can be linked with socialism. And then we talk about how political philosophy in CSS helps us understand the gap between between the Muslim and the Western political philosophers. It helps us understand how, in different ages, different philosophers were present, but their ideas somehow, had some kind of relevance with each other. And this is how we see that in both sides of the world, the political idea, the political maturity was on its rise. And of course, political philosophy in CSS helps students identify the philosophical context of ideas like justice, freedom, virtue, and state relations. So when we study political science in its true sense in contemporary terms, we talk about debate, we talk about giving case studies, we talk about, proving your stance through instances, through scholarly text and all that stuff. But before having that kind of acumen or intellect, one must know the basic fundamentals, because that is how we can kind of, make a comparison between our modern world and the ancient times. And of course, it helps understand the basics of constitutionalism, social development in the context of political growth and evolution. As I discussed before as well, we see that different philosophers talked about different idea of political evolution and how they looked at individuals as citizens, and how they looked at the position of state, and how they looked at various organs of governance, a government and state, and their role in forming peaceful relations. So the next thing that we need to do is to address the elephant in the room, and it's that most of the students find political philosophy tough in CSS. And there are many reasons for that, which I would love to discuss, because I know that most of the students are willing to choose political science as their optional, but they are always, discouraged by the portion of political philosophy. They are very confused by the fact that political philosophy contains a lot of abstract theories and concepts. For example, when I'm talking about equality, justice, equity, sovereignty, these are such concepts that one cannot see. So understanding these concepts and then applying them in real time, or then understanding them in the context of different philosophies, becomes very difficult. And secondly, it's very important to have a strong grip on philosophical jargons. So if you do not know philosophical jargons, you do not know how you need to address the tension between the citizens and the state, and you do not know how you would like to address an issue with respect to a philosophical debate going on in political philosophy. It is quite possible that you might not impress the examiner. So in political philosophy, it's very important to have a great hold on philosophical jargon, and this is something that often confuses the students, but trust me, it's not as difficult as it sounds. One just needs proper reading, proper understanding of the terms, and then one can deal with it in a very scholarly way. And thirdly, one thing that the students get very confused by is comparing different philosophers. So, political philosophy is not just about defining what Aristotle said about this and that, or explaining why Rousseau believed in goodwill or general will. So political philosophy is very analytical. It's not boring, it's not outdated. What makes it very interesting is that it demands comparing different philosophers. And comparing different philosophers is something where the creative side of the students comes forth. But what the students do is that they just believe in cramming the differences, the similarities, and hence this is or this is how they create a difficulty for themselves. And lastly, political philosophy is something that has very modern roots as well. So the students are required to apply these ideas to CSS syllabus, to different scenarios, to different contemporary examples that are happening around the world. And this is something that I'll be explaining further, and then you'll get to know the major point behind my statement. So as I said that the students need to compare different philosophers, they need to apply different ideas of political philosophy to CSS syllabus. It is because when we look at the political philosophy portion in the CSS exam, we see that it not only holds 20 marks in the part A of Pol Science paper 1, but it also is very important in the part B of paper 1, because in part B, basic fundamental concepts of liberty, equality, justice are asked. And in those questions, you need to give reference of different political philosophers. You need to quote their political philosophy where they fit well. For example, questions like related to political philosophy could also be given. But if you read political philosophy of different philosophers, you might not find direct reference to political parties, but you need to make sense out of it. For example, you might need to understand how Aristotle explained that every person needs to be a part of the political affairs, as that is how citizenship could be ensured. So making a relevance, or making an understanding between that point and the point of having political parties in modern political systems makes sense, right? At the same time, you see that political parties are very important form of a very important part of legislature as well. So at the same time, you can make some sense of Montesquieu's idea of separation of power and political parties being at the helm of affairs in creating awareness amongst the citizens, and ensuring smooth relations between the state and citizenry. At the same time, we see that political philosophy is very important with respect to other subjects as well, as it adds a lot of value in CSS essays. In CSS essays, we see that most of the questions are related to women rights. They talk about freedom of speech, media. They talk about dynastic politics and all that stuff. And in addressing those issues, one must have some philosophical understanding of, because only when you have philosophical or theoretical understanding, you can break down your essay in a much more mature manner, and you can address the question more smartly, in a more academic and scholarly way, in a way which can, impress the examiner, because it's not always the information that impresses the examiner, but it is how it's like cross course information, or the information in different courses, and how you make sense of it, and how you merge different pieces of information and make it present as your own. This is something that makes a lot of difference. So yes, this was the video for today, and I think that it has somehow reduced your fear regarding a political philosophy. And